what does she do in order to kind of have that encounter that she desires? Everything needs to be ready. Everything needs to be perfect. This needs to be done, and that needs to be done in preparation for the Lord. The part of it that our Lord is kind of calling out is her anxiety and her worry, like the state of her heart. That ends up being kind of a distraction to receiving, and therefore a barrier to being at Jesus' feet. And that's a key quality in our femininity, is this idea of being open and receptive. You are already the beloved little child of God.
Welcome to the Catholic Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Marie Hanson, and today I am very excited because we are going to be discussing Martha and Mary, what their identities were in the Bible, what Jesus said when he said that one of them had the better part. I know if you're like me and you're a doer, I love to be doing things. This reading stings a little bit. So today we're going to unpack it, and we're going to get to talk to Sarah McKenzie. Sarah is a wife and a mother of 8, plus 1 daughter-in-law, and a registered therapeutic counselor who works in private practice in British Columbia, Canada. In addition to the counseling work she does, she facilitates retreats, speaking engagements, professional development, and virtual workshops for parents, couples, and individuals interested in self-exploration through the lens of faith-integrated parts work. So before we dive in and welcome Sarah, I do want to remind you guys we are on YouTube, so please subscribe to the show over on YouTube. It's so excited to grow over there in a new format, reach people who don't listen to audio podcasts, because I know there's many of my friends and my mom herself, she doesn't really do audio, but she loves YouTube. So glad to reach a whole new group of people over there. Please subscribe to help bump the show. Also, we have a private Facebook group, which is really nice. It's just a community of Catholic women who can ask questions that they're not sure about, just meet new friends. It's just a cute little welcoming community, so I'd love to have you there. Links for both of those will be in the show notes. And then also, I have to point out, this is adorable. If you're listening on audio, I'm wearing an adorable sweater. It is from the Catholic Dress Co., and the Catholic Dress Co. is a beautifully modest Catholic dress, and obviously this is a sweater, a Catholic clothing company. She has adorable outfits, lovely, and they're all at a pretty reasonable price. So go check it out. That is catholicdressco.com, and that will also be linked in the show notes. Okay, well, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my joy to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to unpack this whole Martha and Mary parable. Well, it's not a parable, the whole Martha and Mary story in the gospel. And before we do, I just thought it would be helpful for us to read the actual gospel itself. So let me go ahead and do that, and then we can dive into talking about Martha and Mary. So this comes from Luke 10, 38 through 42. As they continued their journey, he entered a village where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary who sat beside the Lord at his feet listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me." The Lord said to her in reply, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her." The Gospel of the Lord. Okay, so I know every time I hear this, it clicks like, oh, Mary chose the better part. But I am such a Martha. I am a doer. I have to be serving and doing things. And part of me feels like it's my love language. But when I hear this parable, it stings a little bit because I know Jesus is saying we all need to stop and be a beer and not a doer sometimes. So Martha and Mary are categorized in these two different modes, being and doing. So can we talk about both of them? But let's start with the doing, because I know I can relate to it. I think a lot of people can. What is a doing mode?
Yeah, sure. And I really relate to that. I think that this passage always triggers a lot of discussion and some angst in women, for sure, when they feel like they're often the ones, right? The nurturers, in the trenches. All of the tasks and responsibilities are often on their shoulders, the day-to-day stuff, right? So to answer your question, I guess the doing mode can be thought of as a strategy to achieve some good which is really, that's part of our design, right? Is to be able to kind of identify the good in things and to choose for the good using our will, kind of in this top-down fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So in a Bible passage, it's kind of painting this picture that's probably very familiar of how Martha really has the burden of the situation, and she's going around, and you can imagine her like cleaning and getting the food and organizing and all of that in order to prepare for an encounter with our Lord, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we can think about what she desires in that situation, like really to meet with him, like he's coming to enter into her home, and we can think of that as, you know, entering into her heart, so to speak. So what does she do in order to kind of have that encounter that she desires? And that's kind of like everything needs to be ready, like everything needs to be perfect, so to speak. Like this needs to be done and that needs to be done, and in preparation for the Lord. And but the Lord is there already, like he's present, he's available to her. But there's these things that she needs to get done that are kind of keeping her from doing what her sister's doing, which is just to sit there at his feet and receive him already, which is
Mm-hmm.
available to both of them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a strategy to receive something that we can recognize as good. But
Yeah.
if we look at that strategy, sometimes it can be interrupting really the desire of our heart, prolonging that, or be putting a barrier in place of really being able to be with the Lord when
Mm-hmm.
he's there and available. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does the doing, like you said, where is the line between working hard and preparing, which is necessary? And the Bible talks a lot about how important hard work is and doing your full day's work for a full day's wages, all of that kind of stuff. Where's the line between working hard and doing the Lord's will in that sense and not
Mm.
stopping to receive the Lord in this work? Or like, where does it cross the line of this is holy work to now I'm distracting from what I should be actually focused on?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the focus, I mean, the part of it that our Lord is kind of calling out or drawing her attention, so to speak, is her anxiety and her worry, like the state of her heart, so to speak, that ends up being kind of a distraction to receiving, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not necessarily the work that the service, right? Like, which is very important. And like you say, holy in a sense. It's not necessarily that I hear that he's saying, these things are important and don't do these things. He's he's drawing her attention to the way in which she's doing them. So there's something about the work that she's engaging with, or the way that she's engaging with that work, that brings about a great anxiety and a
Mm-hmm.
worry, and therefore a barrier to being at Jesus' feet. And so I think realizing that, it's kind of seeing how are we engaging with the tasks appropriate for our role and our office, mothering or whatever that is. And a good indication that we're not getting that right is our state. Like, is there a certain connectedness and fulfillment and peace that we're getting from engaging with these things? Or are they feeling like a really big burden that isolate us? The sense in the story there is that she's quite on her own. She's
Mm-hmm.
not connected to her sisters. She's not connected with the Lord. And in some translation, I can hear the exasperation in her voice, and she's saying something like, Lord, don't you see? And
Mm-hmm.
whenever I hear that, I always think of attachment wounds or attachment needs that we all have, which is to be like known deeply and seen fully, right? So she's
Mm-hmm.
really saying, like, Lord, don't you see? Like, in a sense, we can think about her saying, don't you see me? Like, in what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing and what I'm pursuing, right? Um, and he points to the things, I think, that
Mm-hmm.
she's pursuing instead of him as this barrier to what she desires. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really
The
good
other
point. And
part I would say is that
oh, go ahead.
this other thing that he identifies is like there's only one thing that's the most important thing, and we could say that they're the most important thing first, right? If we're right order, it's like what's at the highest place, and something about what Mary's doing is her transitioning to recognize that, like she's put the thing in the moment that should be in the highest place, in the highest place. And so then her actions and her choosing and her doing is flowing from that first thing, which is the Lord. So there's a bit of a misordering in the way that she's operating, Martha is. Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I think you hit on 2 points. One, I think there are many aspects of the story, but two that I would like to dive into today. One is that you're right, her anxiety is blocking her from receiving the Lord, which she meant to do. And then two is the attachment and wanting to be seen. So before we dive into that, because I think that touches more on Mary's side in the being mode, let's quickly talk about being blocked by our anxiety from receiving the Lord. The way you were describing that made me think of the holidays that are coming up, because I know, at least in many of my friends and family's homes, this is kind of how it goes. Whoever's hosting, or even if you're not hosting, if you're just bringing food, it's stressful, or it turns into being stressful as you try to prepare. You're trying to clean your house, you're trying to cook, you're trying to get all these things ready, and what's supposed to be a joyful gathering stresses you out, and then you are stressed with your family members, and it's just hard to like put that aside and then have a happy Thanksgiving or Christmas meal or whatever it is. And I know that is a struggle in a lot of families. I personally struggle with this. Anytime I want to host, I want everything to be perfect. I want everything to be spotless, which is not possible with 2 little kids. But I want it to be spotless. I want everything to be done on time. I just want it to be beautiful. And I think there's a good desire there. However, I often let the anxiety and the stress of getting it all done, make me stressed out with my kids, or then it's hard to let the stress go and just enjoy the dinner and all these things. So do you have anything to say towards that? I guess I'm sure a lot of people can relate with the holidays coming up.
Yeah. And one of the things that comes up for me when you say that is this recognition that emotions or states like anxiety that are very fear-based are a real barrier to being receptive. And that's a key quality in our femininity, is this idea of being open and receptive. Like I think of Our Lady in this way, the ultimate example of just let it be done to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to recognize how active anxiety and fear-based emotions, drive states in our body are. And that can be very useful. Moms are superstars that are able to get a million things done and notice so many different things and look after a lot of people's needs. But again, back to the state, like what is the way in which we're engaging with these tasks, and how does letting that anxiety and fear and that over focus on doing and getting everything perfect first before I can have the thing that I desire, have the thing that I want, to be connected with others, right, in my relationships? How does that really get in the way? And it's a barrier to connecting in our systems, which is kind of a complicated conversation. But when we have stress hormones and cortisol very present, especially in a female body, that's a very activating sympathetic nervous system response. And that ends up being a barrier to that kind of more gentle, secure, safe, open connectedness that would be that other mode that we want to be in and is more facilitating of connection, right? So becoming aware of that in our body. How vigilant are we? How activated are we? Is important, that awareness, in order to say, okay, I need to shift here from this mode that I'm in, which is the doing, getting, going, activating state, into something that's a little bit more calm, a little bit more peaceful, a little bit more open and receptive. So I don't feel like I have, no space to be present in the moment to other people in the situation. So I really like that you're highlighting that piece about anxiety. Somebody shared with me a while ago this image, this idea that pray without ceasing, like all the time. And I always thought, like, what does that mean? Like, Your life is so busy and so many things are required of you. How could you possibly be praying all the time without stopping? And this image of Our Lady in the home with Jesus when he was a very small child was shared with me. And the idea was kind of like Our Lady was busy about the kitchen doing whatever she was doing, whatever was required of her. And in my mind, she was in the kitchen making bread or, kneading something or doing something. And our Lord was in the room, but in the corner, and he's kind of like playing on the floor with his toys. And although she's very focused on her task, she has this awareness of his presence. Like the Lord is always present to us, and the Lord was present to her in that room. And she was kind of, her awareness was expanded to include him being there, right? And so she could be with him, although she was doing this. And she was kind of had a sense of him in the sense that if he got up and he left the room and he went to find Joseph and hang out there, it would be like her body would feel like, okay, he's now there, but I can still connect with him. And if she felt like, okay, it's been too long and I don't hear him and whatever, she would leave probably what she was doing and go and find him and then see him and see that he's okay and then go back to her task. So that really helped me try and achieve, and I hate this word balance, but maybe more of an appropriate tension, right? Between what's required of me in this moment, my duties, and being with, like really being able to connect with and feel the presence of the Lord who is there with us and wants to connect with us in all things, right?
I recently came across some new textile designs that actually made me cry. I have actually never cried at textile designs before, but I did for these. Holly Gurton is a contemporary fiber artist, textile designer, teacher, and writer. Her fiber artworks are made using techniques like felt, crochet, and embroidery, and in 2019, she collaborated with Anthropology to create a collection of fall home goods and holiday decorations based off her artwork. How cool is that? Her artwork recognizes the Father's creativity entwined in every surface of the world and the human dignity that is revealed through our participation with it. In her 14 years in textile design, she has created patterns for fashion brands like Lilly Pulitzer and Marie Oliver. She has found that the Father speaks through textiles and in craftsmanship, and in all that she does, she proclaims the beauty of our relationship with the Father as experienced through the work of our hands. She is currently working on a body of work for a solo exhibition in North Carolina in the summer of 2026. Every Friday, she sends a delightful Substack, I absolutely love it, in her newsletter called The Rundown that includes behind-the-scenes looks at her art practice, beautiful discoveries through the world of fashion, interiors, and artisan makers, and what it's like to be a working artist and mom of 4 boys. You can sign up for The Rundown and find all her artwork at hollygurtin.com. That's HOLLYGUERTIN.com and at Holly Gurtin Art on Instagram. I highly recommend it. It is beautiful. Go check her out. Are you a Catholic woman intentionally seeking a deeper relationship with Christ? If so, Valleys of Grace has got you covered. Rooted in mission, daughterhood, and grace, Valleys of Grace handcrafts chapel veils to serve as a physical reminder of a woman's dignity and Christ's personal invitation to grow deeper to Him through the most holy sacrifice of the Mass, in prayer and reverence as you unite yourself to His Sacred Heart. With a wide variety of options and a new liturgical year, along with Christmas rapidly approaching, Valleys of Grace is guaranteed to have the perfect veil for you. These veils make incredible gifts that will be cherished by friends or family. I personally have one, and it is the most beautiful veil I have ever owned in my life, and that is not an exaggeration. So go to valleysofgrace.com to grab yours today, or grab one for a friend or family member as a Christmas gift too. All right, Catholic brides, or honestly, anyone who loves a good Catholic wedding, I need to tell you about something that is so good and so needed in our little Catholic corner of the internet. This episode is brought to you by White Lily Weddings, the one-stop Catholic wedding shop I wish existed when I got married. It's your cozy, curated hub for planning a wedding that's beautiful, meaningful, and deeply Catholic without losing your peace in the process. Inside White Lily Weddings, you'll find gorgeous Catholic wedding templates for programs, invitations, signage, stationery, all of the pretty things you don't want to DIY from scratch. a whole directory of vetted Catholic vendors who actually get the sacrament. And yes, so many of them offer exclusive discounts just for White Lily brides. Seriously, some even offer $1,000 off any package booked with them just for finding them through White Lily Weddings. And here's the part I love. You can also grab their free Ultimate Catholic Wedding Planning Checklist. It's literally the master list with over 350 to-dos that keeps brides sane, organized, and on track while planning a sacramental wedding. It is so, so good. And because you're part of this community, you get 25% off of the entire shop with code CWP. Yep, 25%, the whole shop. So whether you want a stunning mass program, a vendor list you can actually trust, or just a checklist that stops the "am I forgetting something" panic, head to whitelillyweddings.com. That's white, LILY, weddings.com, and use the code CWP for 25% off. Make your Catholic wedding as beautiful and intentional as the marriage you're preparing for. I love that. I love that analogy. And yeah, anyone who's a mom could really relate to that, because you can sense your kids, you know what they're doing, but you might be cooking, you might be cleaning, but you can, see them out of the side of your eye, or you hear them in the next room. And that's such a great way to relate, feeling the presence of Jesus and being connected to him all the time. I love that. So let's dive in to the Mary side. You kind of talked about how, Martha is supposed to be more present. A couple of things. We'll get into the attachment stuff later. But how do we, I guess let's just start. What is the doing mode? What is Mary doing differently that Martha's not doing?
So we would say that maybe Martha is kind of operating in this doing mode. And if Mary is an example of the being mode, it's kind of, it's a different strategy to pursue the goods of the heart, the desires of the heart, so to speak, right? And it focuses first from a place of identity. She's very connected in that moment with her foundational identity as a beloved, small, daughter of God. And so that knowing and the awareness in that area allows for her decisions, her choosing, and her doing to flow from that realization. It's again this kind of top-down ordering where we can identify the good, the ultimate good in that moment, like be with the Lord. He's right there. He's available to me. I want to receive him. And then choosing the good, which would be the act of the will, right? The doing. And that's flowing from this first thing, the thing that the Lord said. There's only one thing that matters, right? And so she's really receiving the bridegroom in that moment, right? She's appropriately letting all other things become secondary considerations to the Lord. And not to say that she won't get up in a moment and help her sister, or to do the cleanup, or whatever that might look like, right? But she's able to see from that place of, who am I? Who do I belong to? What am I meant to be doing, flowing from that like identity category, so to speak, right? And so there becomes this beautiful participation between her and the Lord in that moment. And I always think back to the creation story, which says, God gives this identity, like this pattern, this creative knowing to the earth in a sense. It's like he created this specific thing. He brought forth this, he said, let this exist, let this be a thing, right? In his creative power. But then he said, like, let the earth bring forth the variability and like the specifics, the nuanced ways in which the vision that he bestowed is realized, right? I often think of like a tree in this moment. So it comes from this little seed, and God gave us this seed. We could think like God gave us the pattern, like the category, the framework for the tree. But in order for that seed to be, that potential in there to become realized, it has to be planted in the soil, and it has to be nurtured, taken care of, and interact with all kinds of other elements, like the sun and the rain and the fertilizer and the weeding, like all that stuff. And in that we get the fullness of the pattern. We get this beautiful tree but it's not like a rigid program. It's not something that's every tree looks the same, so to speak, right? There's whether it'll be more full, whether it will be tall, whether it will like all of that. What are the particulars of the way in which that tree really came to fruition? And so I think of our relationship with the Lord kind of in this way. It's like where we're given this identity and there's kind of parameters on that, right? There's a specific a nature, so to speak, to our femininity and to our identity as God's beloved child. But within that, there's so much play, like there's so much for us to contribute. And he designed it to be that way, right? He designed it for us to participate in that being. And so the being mode would be about that, right? Like this pursuit of this idea of who am I in the Lord's eyes, participating in becoming more of that image, more of that likeness all the time throughout our doing. But it starts from that place. It's kind of like, this might be a silly example, but often I think of the difference between like, don't tell a lie, like don't lie, and then tell the truth, right? It's a very nuanced difference. But to me, it's like, don't lie would be the doing mode, right? Like almost like this anxiety about going around and making sure like everything we say is exactly the truth and it's black and white. And, really, I'm pursuing this thing in a narrow way. But tell the truth is more of a place of like, what would a person who is, connected to being God's child and wanting to live that out in a genuine way, what would they naturally do? They would pursue naturally what is true. They would try to align themselves with that reality. They would try to use their speech to reflect that good and reflect that reality. So I don't know if that's too broad or vague. Maybe you could help me be more specific if I need to be. But chewing on that for a while, letting that settle in our hearts to kind of understand, like, if I start from this place of who am I, trying to really accept that identity in our hearts, then hopefully my doing and acting will naturally flow from that first kind of premise.
Mm-hmm.
How does that land with
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So I think it's a lot easier said than done. And I think I know
Definitely.
and I think many of our listeners will struggle with the little beliefs and identities that we've been told or fed or learned throughout our lives that burden us. So how can we, little by little, work on
Mm.
letting go of those, chipping away at those so that we can conform to the identity that God truly has for us?
Yeah. Yeah. And I really hear you. Yes, it is. I mean, I always think it's a good idea to start from the ideal. It's like, what are we striving for here? And then to really be gentle with ourselves and accept that grace in there to understand that, we will not achieve that likely. I mean, in this lifetime. So both and like, yes, I got to know where I'm going and I got to know what the ideal is, but also we fall short every day and the Lord knows that. He knew that and he allowed for that, right? So but to your question about identity lies, so to speak, these beliefs that we hold, that we walk around with, if I look at Martha, I can think, I can wonder about what's burdening her and what identity lie and distraction is burdening her and motivating her to seek connection with the Lord in this particular way. When I think about it, I think of things that we bestow on our kids when we're parenting, things like, "Oh, you are such a great little helper," or like, "Oh, this is," I can imagine someone patting her on the head and saying, "This is Martha. She's my little mother. She's my little doer," so to speak. So we receive all of these kinds of different identities in our hearts, while we're growing up. And these are good things. You pointed to that, like people that can engage in a lot of different tasks and service and things that need to be done. But when it gets put into the identity category so that you're thinking, this is who I am primarily, this is who I am deeply and maybe first, then it starts to get a little bit disordered and become a burden that we have to kind of act out that primary identity And we see kind of an imbalance in that. So those little hurts and those little wounds, so to speak, they need to be healed. And so when we think about healing, the way I talk about it is kind of like there's a barrier there to accepting, receiving our true identity from the Lord, but also a barrier there to receiving what he wants to give us, which is his grace, his love, his forgiveness, his presence, right? So healing isn't about, being restored to pre-fallen state or never being in pain again or never having any hardship, which is a lot of the times how we approach healing. I want to feel better. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to be hurt anymore, But healing in the way that we work on it is kind of saying, I want to be more connected to the Lord. I want to receive more from him. And what are the things that are blocking that way? And if I can be healed, it would mean removing that impediment to him, trying to get whatever's in the way, blocking the flow of grace, so to speak. Can I become aware of what that thing is? And can I invite the Lord into that place to try to find out, what is true? What are those beliefs that are burdening me? But then what is the truth in that empty space that we've created? Yeah.
So how can we do this practically? What are things that people can do or implement in their lives to work on chipping away at this to get to their true identity in Christ?
Yeah. And I love that you said chipping away at that identity, because oftentimes I think of that I'm trying to think who, maybe it's Henry Nouwen. I'm probably butchering his name because he's French and I'm not, but he talks about this idea of like becoming the beloved. And that's the image that he uses is of a sculpture. This is not about the doing in the sense that you have to like go out and get that thing you don't have, learn that new skill, take that course, go to the gym and lose 20 pounds. And it's like everything to be worthy. Instead, he's saying, no, you have to start from the first and most important thing, which is you are already the beloved little child of God, daughter of God. So how do we release? How do we put down? And how do we chip away at all the things we've collected that have become part of us that are not that, in order to reveal a beautiful sculpture, a beautiful image of the likeness of our true identity, right? And so that really is the project, is to try to start from the place of this is who I am. And how do I chip away? How do I let go of all that is not that, right?
Yep.
So how do we do that? The first thing is to really connect with that, is to try to say, okay, if I were to sit down and really believe and accept this identity from the Lord, what are the things that come up for me? What are the voices in my head? What are the parts of me that object to that say like, I just really don't believe that he loves me unconditionally. They have a lot of that going on inside, a lot of parts that are burdened with worries and concerns that we're not good enough, or we're not worthy of that kind of love, or if he really knew, it would be a different story kind of thing. So, I mean, in the counseling world, one of the ways that I address that with people is to use what we call faith integrated parts work. So it's understanding that, like our trinitary God, we're both a multiplicity and a unity. So we have all of these different parts of us inside, and some of them are more ready to believe that the Lord loves us and receive that love. But then we have other parts of us that are kind of burdened by experiences and identity lies that struggle to do that. So the project is kind of to sit down and help people connect with their inner self, which we would say the image of God in us, the unburdened self, and get to know that part of us and kind of invite that part to enter into a relationship with the other parts that have different beliefs. I'm not good enough. I need everything to be perfect before I can receive the Lord, things like that. And try to kind of facilitate healing through that relationship. Oftentimes the way that we're burdened is through relationship. And so reparenting is sometimes a word that people use to talk about that. But essentially, it's trying to allow for those attachment needs in us to be met. So it's kind of this relational thing of the Holy Spirit flowing through the inner self to the parts of us that are wounded or burdened or heavy with an identity lie, so that we can allow for that love to be seen, to be known, whatever didn't happen that should have happened, in order to kind of get some relief and have our needs met and have our have the truth spoken into those spaces, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And then one last question, you kind of touched on this a little bit before about how we speak identity into our kids. Not every listener is a parent, but for those who are, can you just give a little bit of advice or tips or what you see in your practice on how we can speak good identity into our kids and not, I don't know, ones that hurt them or harm them? I know you said saying things like you are smart is bad, and I know I've heard that before. I don't fully understand why. And I also want to say, like, I know as parents, we all want to give our kids the perfect upbringing, don't want to cause them any trauma, but none of us will ever be perfect parents, and we will all traumatize our kids in some way, shape, or form, or, cause problems in their life. Just nobody's a perfect parent. So I do want to say that because I know I strive, I'm sure all my listeners strive, but sometimes it can feel overwhelming, like I can't remember all this stuff, I'm doing it wrong, and that's not how I want people to feel either. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well.
Yes, 100%. Yes. Yes to everything that you're saying. It's not meant to be a burden and a judgment, but to say, how can we continue to become more aware and more intentional about the way that we speak to our kids or ourselves, to try and align that with what is true. And so when we're talking to our kids, and what we really want primarily is for them to know at a foundational level who they are, which is a child of God, a beloved child of God. And on top of that, we have all kinds of other identities that we participate in, friend, sibling, eventually a wife in some way, or a mother in some way, in the sense that we are spiritual mothers, biological mothers, that can look like many things. But those roles and identities are part of who we are, but they're not primary identities. So again, we're trying to have that solid foundation of that primary identity so that the other things can flow naturally and in a healthy way from that place, and they can be right ordered. So when we're trying to talk to our kids and we are using the statement, you are, what I want people to think of is to realize in that moment, you're bestowing an identity onto your child's heart. And so that awareness can help us to be a little bit more intentional about the way that we say that. Sometimes identities can become a really heavy burden, things that we think that we're saying that are positive. Oh, you are very smart. Oh, you are, in the case of women, I meet a lot of women who are very burdened by identity statements about what they look like. You are so pretty, you are so beautiful, all of these different things. And they came from a place of love, but they can become a burden, because what we can learn from that is, okay, that's my primary identity. I received this praise, I received this connection, I received this positive interaction with a loved one, and it is all centered around them saying that I am pretty. So then we make a connection between being pretty and this loving connection, relational experience that we had. And so that becomes a strategy of being pretty so that I can have that memory of being connected in that moment and being praised and being delighted in and being loved. So we can start to pursue those attachment needs that we all have through the lens of that identity. And it really makes that very rigid and black and white. The belief can become, I have to be pretty in order to be loved, or I have to be smart in order to be accepted or praised or worthy, right? So what I say to parents is try to see if you can talk about processes instead when you're wanting to really notice and draw your child's attention towards good things that they're participating in, things that you want to praise them for. Try and focus on action-oriented words. So I really noticed that, that was a big struggle, and you just kept with it, and you kept working at it. I really noticed that you did that. I really noticed that you're trying to be helpful in this moment, or you were trying to help someone else, right? In service. Or, I really noticed that you were trying to be a kind friend to that person in that interaction. You get the idea, right? Like trying
Mm-hmm.
to shift more away from identity statements that are rooted in characteristics or in having to be a certain way, um, and try to notice action-oriented things that are positive instead. Just trying to be more aware and maybe make that little shift.
Love it. What about beauty? Because I know all of us want to tell our kids they're beautiful or, some kind of compliment like that. What would you say in regards to that? Because I can think of action-oriented ones for almost every other compliment
Well,
except for that one.
yeah. And I get it. That's a hard one. And beauty is a very important part. Um, I was going to say feminine heart, but in all things for all of us, it's very, part of this, what is beautiful is true and also good, like that kind of thing. Excuse me. So we're trying to make a differentiation between the objectively beautiful, and things that are surface, aesthetically, a beautiful or surface beauty and appealing. And so I say things to my kids like, "Oh, you have a beautiful heart." And if I want to say like, "Wow, you put yourself together, you're trying to go to mass, you have a dress on, you did all these things," I might say to them like, "Oh, I can see that you really wanted to get fancy for the Lord. Like you're really getting ready to go to the wedding banquet or whatever, like that kind of thing, right?" Um, yeah, especially with our daughters, because there's a lot of wounds and a lot of hurts around having to be beautiful or having to be pretty. Obviously, the culture's message is that in an overwhelming way. So trying to shift the way that we talk about it in a way that fits,
Hmm.
um, can be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I do think it's a fine line to walk because as women, if you were never told you're beautiful, that would really
Yeah.
hurt too. But at the same time, the culture puts so much emphasis on appeal and not like true beauty, but like appeal, like you said. And so trying to find ways to tell your daughters, show them their true beauty without putting too much emphasis on the cultural aesthetic appeal. So that was helpful. If there is one thing from this whole conversation today that you could leave our listeners with, what would that be?
I think the thing that comes up for me is delight. It's one of the attachment needs that we see is the one that most people don't have, or they didn't have that in their life. When I'm working with people who are saying to me like, I don't know why I feel like this. I don't know why I feel lonely or depressed or all of this. Like I had a great childhood. I had two parents that were there for me and they loved me, and on and on and on. And sometimes when I ask them this question, I say, well, who in your life delighted in you? And 9 times out of 10, we get this kind of emotional response, this longing, because that's a very hard thing to achieve as a parent. And it's a very hard thing to receive. And it's this sense of the fact that people are happy that you are here, that you exist in the world, not because of anything that you've done, not because of anything that you achieved or learned or, any of those things, but just of the fact that you're here. And that's very hard. It's very hard to make sure we're doing that. We're bestowing that to our kids because, life is so busy. And a lot of times we have this pressure to affirm the good things that they're doing, to notice like, oh, I know you were struggling with that and you really achieved that. And I delight in the things that you're learning, but trying to carve out a space for delighting in the fact that they just walk into a room, not because of anything they did or said, but just because they're there, right? And for us to find healing in that area. If that's something that we feel like, oh yeah, I don't have an abundance of experiences where I really felt that the people around me felt that it was just better that I was there than if I wasn't. That sense of just being delighted in. And yeah, pursuing healing in that area, coming to prayer and becoming receptive to the Lord delighting in us, not for anything that we're doing, but just being with, right? And trying to get to the point where we can really receive that from him. That can be really very healing. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, this idea of this attachment need of being delighted in.
I love that. And honestly, I feel like I see that spoken about a lot regarding our husbands, how we should be happy when they walk in the door and all these things. But you're right, the same thing should apply to our children too. So I really, really love that. If our listeners want to connect with you more, see more of your work, learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a website. My private practice is called Mountain View Therapy. So that's www.mountainviewtherapy.ca because we are in Canada. And I'm on Instagram. I think that'll be posted in the show notes. You can check me out there. You can email me, sarah@mountainviewtherapy.ca. And yeah, I don't have a huge presence on social media, so that's about it. But through my practice, I do virtual workshops, virtual parts work, healing things and all kinds of good stuff. And that's all on the website. So
Beautiful. And all of that will be linked in the show notes for everybody too. Sarah, thank you so much. And for everybody who's listening, if you made it this far, I would really love if you could go leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening. If you do go to Apple, if you could also take 10 seconds and leave us a positive commentary review, that would be so, so helpful too. All of those things help boost the show in the algorithm, help get us out to new Catholic women who really need to hear all of the goodness that we have here, to reach new guests. It just helps us make the show bigger so we can bring in more people, get more guests, all of the things. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you all in 2 weeks.